I want to start this video first by saying rest in peace to Val Kilmer, the absolutely legendary actor, and offer my condolences to his family, friends, and loved ones. We don't do a lot of videos covering the deaths of celebrities, though it is something that happens, quite frequently in the industry, but we don't cover it a lot. And we covered a little bit when Gene Hackman died. We covered a little bit when Michelle Trachtenberg died, I think because she was so young, that was so shocking. But I don't think that it's considered shocking with Val Kilmer. He had been in poor health for some time. He had throat cancer, I think going back to 2014. He had lost his voice. In fact, they made a documentary about him a couple of years ago, and I believe his son voiced him in the documentary. And I know they did a lot of work digitally to be able to hear his voice when they brought him back for Top Gun Maverick as Iceman. But Val Kilmer is an absolutely legendary actor. And I want to talk a little bit about some of these stories that I was reading about him. I want to ask a couple of questions kind of, to the ether about what it means when a celebrity dies and how we as a society seem to react to it, and how I think that that's changing in current year, given the way that actors behave now on social media and just the different way in which celebrity is viewed, and just talk about it a little bit. It's I'm going to kind of just go all over the place. So yes, he died of pneumonia. It was a big deal because look, he died on April 1st, and one of those things, it's like whenever there's something reported on April 1st, you can't really trust anything. But because it was reported in the evening, I didn't see anybody kind of wondering whether this was true or not. And I think everyone was, although they weren't shocked, was truly saddened by this news, because there aren't a lot of leading man actors that really feel like they changed the industry in the way that Val Kilmer did. It's particularly relevant to me. I'm sure I'll reference it several times in this video because Heat is my personal favorite movie of all time. It is. And him as Christopher in that film is just one of those performances that I just really, really love. And in general, it harkens back to a time when cinema just felt different because there was so much more of an unknown for people. Because, look, you didn't have access to actors in the industry the way that you do now because of social media and easy access to the trade publications and all of this information. And it was just a different time. I mean, this was a man who starred in some of, like, if we're talking about movies that I loved, we're talking about Top Gun. We're talking about Heat. We're talking about Batman Forever, which I still maintain to this day is an underappreciated Batman film for all its faults, for all the faults of what came after it with Batman and Robin with George Clooney. Like, I love Batman Forever, and he's a big part of it. I think that he did a great job as Bruce Wayne, not just as Batman, and I loved it. Tombstone, all of these movies, and then there's so many more that are loved that weren't really necessarily the ones that I love the most, like Willow, Billy the Kid, The Doors, which I didn't see until years and years later. There was just The Saint, which has one of the most legendary covers of all time. I still, you'd go to the video store. I don't think I was old enough to rent movies like that back then, but you saw the cover of that movie, and it's still one of those that when I pass by it, I'm like, I remember that. So it was just sad. It was just sad to see. And I was just thinking about some of these interesting, everybody who watches PCC knows that I love IMDb trivia. It is one of my favorite things in the world, and I contribute to it regularly. And I was just thinking about some of the ones that I remember, because, anytime I would watch a Val Kilmer movie, I would go and I would peruse it. And the great thing about those older actors is that they have really, really long lists of quotes and things that have been filled out, and you get all of this detail. It feels like you're getting to know the person. And I remember reading that he didn't want to do Top Gun, but he was contractually obligated to do so. And then obviously the role became iconic. The movie became iconic. And he would eventually then come back to Top Gun when they made Top Gun Maverick decades and decades later. And they did all that work to make sure that he could have a great appearance in that film. Learning that apparently the role of Christopher in Heat was supposed to go to Keanu Reeves, which then draws me back to thinking about how Keanu Reeves, he wasn't the first choice to play Neo in The Matrix. It was actually Will Smith that was supposed to play Neo in the Matrix, and like little stuff like that. You get this feel of this lived-in world of all of these actors that changed your childhood, even though you don't know them. And I feel like that's missing from, you know, most of Hollywood today because of just the ease of access that everybody has to celebrities. And I think it's funny in a way because, look, we know more now than we ever did before about actors, yet they have no aura in the way that actors like Val Kilmer had back in the day. So let's go through some of this. I want to read through this article from Variety, and then I want to go to a couple of these stories. So Val Kilmer, who played Bruce Wayne in Batman Forever, channeled Jim Morrison in Oliver Stone's The Doors, and played Doc Holliday in Tombstone, died Tuesday in Los Angeles. His daughter Mercedes told the New York Times the cause of death was pneumonia. He was 65 and had been battling throat cancer for several years. His reps did not immediately respond for comment. That's understandable. Another thing that I thought was interesting is, like, you know, Top Gun being what it was. I love Top Gun, and it's like a Tony Scott film, right? And I love, like, anybody who's watched PCC again knows that I am a particular fan of Tony Scott's work. And I was thinking about how they said, like, he did a Tony Scott movie every decade. He did Top Gun. He did True Romance. He did Deja Vu, which I really, really love. And then I was thinking about it, how... and this is just to me, like, this isn't going to be interesting to anyone but me, but, like, Tony and Ridley Scott actually ended up being executive producers on a show in the 2000s called Numbers, starring David Krumholtz, and Rob Moreau, which I really, really liked. You guys know that I love the old police procedurals, and it was always fun to know that, like, the Scott brothers ended up doing that. And then at one point in, like, season 2 or season 3, Val Kilmer just showed up in the season finale as, like, he played like he played like a Chinese spy. I'm like, he was born to, like, I think to, like, one white parent, one Chinese parent, and then was raised to be a spy in China. And it was like he showed up at the end of the episode. He wasn't even, like, the focal point, but it was just weird to go and watch this show, which was, you know, back then television wasn't what television is now. You didn't expect to see big name actors back in 2007 show up on network television procedurals. So seeing him show up then was just very, very cool. And I just think back to stories like that. And I got to thinking to some of these other things. So let's look through some of these. I thought this was interesting first. I saw Razor Fist posted this. Asked at a convention panel if Val Kilmer was difficult to work with, Michael Biehn replied, "I don't know." Then after a brief pause, he added, "I never met Val Kilmer while filming Tombstone. I only met Doc Holliday." So it's like this legendary story within Hollywood that Val Kilmer is difficult to work with. And now I think that holds a different connotation than it used to in Hollywood. So what I think about it is different now is, like, when people think of actors now, they think of them as entitled. They think of them as annoying. They don't think of them as artists. Now, back in the day, it was still a trope. It was still kind of a stereotype that actors could be self-absorbed, that actors didn't really care about people other than themselves because, you know, that they had everything handed to them by agents and by managers. So, you know, Hollywood actually used to do a fairly good job of satirizing themselves and the type of person an actor was. But the difference is like an actor back in the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, I don't think people imagined that somebody like Val Kilmer is difficult to work with because he's a prima donna. They believed back in the day that an actor would be difficult to work with because they truly believed that they were creating amazingly important art and they wanted to get it right. It was about work ethic and not necessarily ego. And nowadays that seems to have shifted, I think, a lot to do with the demystification of actors in Hollywood. But you don't really think of an actor that is thought of as difficult to work with today as being somebody that's difficult to work with in the service of something great. You think of them as being difficult to work with in service of self. And that's a distinction that I think is extremely important given the fact that eventually, and I do believe this to be true, like, look, celebrity deaths in the future, they're not going to hit us the way that they hit us now, because at least for the next generation, for Gen Z, Gen Alpha, the deaths of celebrities aren't going to hold the same quarter, because to them, social media has demystified everything about them. I still remember where I was at the moment when I found out that Heath Ledger died, like to this day. And I don't feel like you're going to see that type of thing in the future. So for me, what happened was I was getting off on an off-ramp in my car. It was back in, I guess that was 2008. And I stop at the intersection, and a guy bumps into my car. And it was at that moment that I had heard that Heath Ledger died. And when I got out of the car, the guy in the car behind me had just heard this news too. And I still remember that to this day. And many people still remember what happened when Heath Ledger died, because it played such a big part in the mystery and all of the ambiance that in the build up to The Dark Knight. And in the future, look, celebrity deaths just won't have that for us. It's just not going to be a thing, because now every actor is on social media. Every actor posts everything about every opinion they have. They oftentimes have those opinions to the detriment of their fans, because a lot of times, a fan can disagree with you, but even when they disagree with you, it's the way that it's oftentimes phrased because of the snarky nature of social media, or the self-important nature of social media, that people just don't have the ability to put bygones, put things aside and accept these opinions as something that isn't somebody that's attacking them. So look, we're not going to hold that, that aura around actors that we used to have. And I think that that's a shame. I think that for a lot of actors, they actually harm themselves by being out there too much in the public sphere, because when actors, from newer generations pass, there just isn't going to be that connection that people have with the audience. So there were some other ones that I thought was really interesting. I wanted to share this one with you guys. If you don't know who Bonfire Legend is, Dallas Sonnier, he's an incredible film producer. He's done a bunch of amazing work. He's a great guy. I actually did an episode of IRL with him back in the day. And he shared this story that I just thought was fantastic. So I'm going to go through it here. He says, as you know, Top Gun is not only my favorite movie of all time, but I consider it to be one of the 3 best movies ever made, alongside The Deer Hunter and The Searchers. In 1996, my parents almost bought a second home in Santa Fe, New Mexico, where we were touring one of the houses. Or when we were touring one of the houses, I was snooping through a photo album on the coffee table and realized it was tons of photos from the set of Real Genius, and that Val Kilmer was in a bunch of them. I told the realtor that Top Gun was my favorite movie, and that I loved Val Kilmer, and that I was going to be a movie producer when I grew up. Realizing that I knew that this was Val's house, she then took us to a secret garage and showed us where he kept the Batmobile from Batman Forever. That is so freaking cool. I remember Ben Affleck talking about, I think he wanted to keep the bat suit from not from the Dark Knight. He wanted to keep the bat suit from Batman v Superman, and I don't think the studio let him. But the story goes on. He says, later that day, we get back to the hotel. He says, and there was a message light blinking on the room's telephone, and the message was from Val frickin' Kilmer. He says, hey, Sonnier family, thanks for checking out my house today. I hear your son loves Top Gun and wants to be a movie producer. Why don't you guys swing by the house that evening before dinner and we can talk movies? I nearly passed out. My parents thought it was a friend pranking them, but instead we called them back to take him up on the offer. A few hours later, my mom and I go over to Val's house. His new girlfriend is there, a local waitress from the Santa Fe who is maybe 25. He's in the middle of a divorce at the time, so his kids are running around and the household is total chaos, but in a cool way. He walks us out into the back patio. And he hands me a beer. Now I was the party king of my high school and had a fake ID at 14, and my mom wasn't about to embarrass me in front of one of my favorites. So as a teenager, I got to drink a beer with Val Kilmer on his back porch, overlooking the valley outside of Santa Fe. We sat for about a half an hour, and I asked him probably 50 questions. He told me all about making movies, about working with great directors like Tony Scott and Joel Schumacher, who I told him directed my second favorite movie, The Lost Boys. At least 30 of my questions were about working with Don Simpson and Jerry Bruckheimer. Jerry Bruckheimer is an underrated producer, and everybody should give him more love and respect. As we finished, the doorbell rang, and the Cardinal of Santa Fe walks in to have dinner with Val. We thanked Val for his generosity, said goodbye, and left. There was no stopping me from pursuing my Hollywood dreams after this moment. I signed up for USC summer school the next year, and the rest was history. Over the years, I often thought of this moment and all the cool things he told me. The only regret is that he was essentially too sick to work consistently by the time I was producing. We offered him several roles over the years, but his health just couldn't allow for it. I hope he knows now how much that day meant to me and that he will be missed big time. You want to know who the best is? That's him. Iceman. It's the way he flies. Ice cold. No mistakes. Rest in peace, Val Kilmer. And I thought that was an amazing story. And then we had this quote. This was a quote from him when they asked him about what his experience was like working on Heat. He said, well, imagine being able to say Al and Bob for the rest of your life. He's talking about Al Pacino and Robert De Niro. Not many people can do that. I've seen Bob giggling like a schoolgirl in a van in the middle of the night because we have to be quiet because they're filming outside. I have been hugged by Al Pacino in the middle of downtown LA like he was my brother. I have shot live rounds from high-powered assault weapons over Bob's head while rehearsing lines from our film. I got to kiss Ashley Judd. I sometimes lived at Michael Mann's house. I am in one of the greatest cops and robbers films in history. He's right, and in my opinion, the best cops and robbers film in history. My personal opinion. We all work hard, but when you are with the icons, you really get squared away. Loved every minute of it. I think about it, and I think about movies like Heat, which stand the test of time. You think about performances in Batman Forever, where even though the movie is not looked upon as fondly as other movies, someone who loves Val Kilmer can watch that work and truly love it. And you think about the effect that Top Gun had on the cultural zeitgeist 30 years later when they made Top Gun Maverick, and you realize just how important and special, the act of filmmaking can actually be when it's done with love, when it's done with care, and it's done with professionals who love the work. And I think Val Kilmer was absolutely one of those people. So do you guys think, like I do, that access to social media and the way in which we have kind of been led into every actor's personal lives, with almost no veil, is that destroying the mystery and the mystique of acting as a profession and those who do it well? Let me know down in the comments. I want to offer condolences again to Val Kilmer's family. Rest in peace, Val Kilmer. We will be back with new episodes of Pop Culture Crisis Monday through Friday, 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. See you there, guys. Later. Thanks for watching. Listen to full episodes of Pop Culture Crisis on Spotify.
Keep up with us on social media and make sure you subscribe and ring that bell so you never miss the show. Bye, guys.